Hello students, I hope that this video finds you well. And in this video, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on getting started on your using the MIDI sequencer assignment, all right? This assignment builds right off of your simple short drum assignment, okay? So the point of this, or what we're doing here is we're building off of your drum project, pulling ideas out of there, and we're adding elements of pitch, and we're adding a new type of a type of tool here. We're using a synthesizer. All right, so going over some of the requirements here, you see the duration is longer. All right, this project is 45 seconds to 65 seconds. So you have about a minute of music to write. So that's going to mean that you're going to repeat some of the patterns in your drum project or expand or something like that. We're still working with at least 2 distinct sections. And in this, I recommend, well, your requirement is 3 layers or parts per section. And I recommend for guidelines, you can use the classic drums, bass, chords, and a melody kind of an approach. And this goes right along, for your inspiration. An example that I show you guys is, this MIDI sequencer music. It comes right out of sorry if this is a little loud. Woo. Oh my. Well, you get the idea, but that's Juan Atkins, No UFOs. Actually, let's go a little deeper into that track. Let's go in here. Yeah, all right. Okay, so you get the point, and hopefully I didn't blow your ears with that. There's a lot of different levels going on here. But Juan Atkins, okay, as we've been talking about in class, a pioneer of Detroit techno, and actually this MIDI sequencer here that we're working in Amped Studio is all based, right? It's all based on this kind of an approach to this kind of music that Juan Atkins and the Belleville 3 out of Detroit that they pioneered. A lot of people are making this kind of music with sequencers and things like this, but so for example, like when we make a region here, right, in the track, and we open up the note editor, we have this grid that corresponds to both time. So we've been using the time to sequence rhythms, and now we're also, you can use the note editor or the drum editor. All right, if we add a drumpler in here, for example, right, each of this layer, this grid here, corresponded with a drum sound. And that also, the pitches correspond with the drum. But now, with our new instrument that we're using, the Volt Mini, we're actually going to play pitches just like pitches on the piano or something else. Now, I must say, as I mentioned in the overview on this module, there's kind of this gray area between expectations with electronic instruments and with regular, acoustic instruments. With pitches, we know that these are not acoustic instruments, so there's a few tricks that we have to do to meet some of the expectations that people have of electronic music instruments. We can, talk a little more in depth with that. It might be a little beyond this tutorial, but just keep in mind, that when we open up a preset that says brass sound, there's really not a brass instrument in there. We're just trying to mimic or emulate the sound of a brass instrument, but it's really not a brass instrument. Okay, so let's get going. Let me show you something right here. Well, first let me mute this, and here's a sound where I'm going to lead everybody to in this tutorial. So here's kind of a finished product here. That's a little, well, that's loud on my ears. So there we go. Turn that down. Oh, that's what was happening. It's just my interface was up. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, here we go. Holy cow, is that the sound of Amped Studio? Well, yes, it is. And those are the synthesizers that we're going to start working in today. That is the Volt Mini synthesizer and also the General MIDI player. Okay, so keep that in mind. Look it down here in my device chain. But first, let's get started with a simple session here. Okay, so you know that when you add a track, you've seen, you see where this is going now, but let me just mute these. And we'll get back to this, okay? We'll get back to this. So, you know that when we start a new track in Amped Studio, it automatically loads with this thing called the Volt Mini. But for argument's sake, let me just go ahead and start from the beginning here. Let me double check that this is all running. There we go. All right. When I add a new device, we go in here, and the main device here is the Volt Mini. It's not hard to use. I have a simple MIDI keyboard plugged in, but if you don't have a MIDI keyboard, of course, you can go down here to the tray and open up the virtual keyboard. You can play this with your computer keyboard or a QWERTY keyboard. You can click on here, right? But you know, I'm using a MIDI controller. All right, so there's the first sound that comes up. This instrument, it's a subtractive synthesizer. A synthesizer is the tool of choice or the instrument of choice of an electronic musician. It's a programmable electronic instrument. We won't be programming synthesizers at this stage yet. That comes later on in the course, but we can still use synthesizers because these have all kinds of presets. Look at up here in this menu. All you have to do is hit this drop-down menu. It loads ambient keys, but if we just hit bass 1, okay, look at this. These presets or these settings change. My keys are a little sticky right now. I think there's some lag or something. There we go, bass 2. So we can hear that one's a little bit more readier. I'll just point out this is the waveform right here on the synthesizer. You can see them changing here. When you see, just, you know, if you use your ears, when you see something that's more square looking, you're going to get a readier sound, all right, like this one. That has some noise in it, right? So, you know, just that one's smoother. So just, you know, the name of the game here really is going through and finding some presets that you like and working with them. Find something that inspires you, find something that's cool. Okay, there's all kinds of just you know, fun, funky stuff in here. Some of this stuff, when you play it on your keyboard though, brings up an interesting point. Like, okay, here's that brass sound I was alluding to. Okay, so that's recognizable, and that works well with pitches. But listen to this clean kick sound. You know, that's an interesting example because it clearly sounds like a kick drum, but it's also slightly pitched. And I think that's interesting. This dirty kick here. It's barely even pitched, right? I mean, there's an octave below my middle C. So we can hear that it's being triggered by a lower waveform, okay, right here. But it's so noisy. It's essentially unpitched, right? Something like a hard style sound. You know, it's lightly pitched, and the keys, right, they're going to be a lot more pitched. Okay, so interesting set of sounds. You can go crazy and just start playing all of these sounds, and I think that is fantastic. That's an excellent idea. But what I'm going to show you is a way to creatively make some inroads here and to begin layering your drum sounds with some synth sounds, and then layering those sounds to really get somewhere beyond the presets. Okay, so we're moving beyond just presets into layering. Take a look at this. Where am I? Okay, here I am. I have a simple drum pattern set up right here. And if you'll notice, I have something different than the Drumpler set up. Let me put the Drumpler module on. Here's my simple drum pattern that I laid down. It's quantized. It starts on the second bar because, you know, it's just kind of funky getting it to start on the first bar. But anyway, I could have moved it over, but that's just my style. Here we are. So let's listen to it. On the Berlin kit. Right, and the idea is I can change these kits. Let me give it a little more volume here. And you know, the drums don't always line up. Right. So the idea here is when we look at these notes, we can move these around to correspond with the you know, there's 12 pads in the Drumpler. Okay. But I'm going to show you something else in just a minute, okay? And it has everything to do with this thing called the GM player, or GM module. Let's go back over here. Here's our Volt Mini. We have settings. These are all presets, but it is a subtractive synthesizer, okay? We can change waveforms on it. These are the elements of synthesis that we'll study later on. These all have a meaning, okay? And this is based on a signal. This is signal-based synthesis. And you use this signal to create a pile of sounds, essentially. And then you use a filter right here to shape those sounds and to, you know, kind of carve them out, sculpt them. A lot like the way a sculptor takes away materials. So that's the name of that's where it gets that name, subtractive synthesis. If I go ahead and mute that, or, you know, device power on and off, and then I get something called the GM player. Okay, this stands for General MIDI Instruments, and it's loading a preset bank. Now we'll go over this next week in depth when we talk about MIDI. The magic number for MIDI is 128. That's the bit depth, and this protocol was standardized in 1984. So that's the technology that we're working with. So in here, we have what engineers and musicians agreed on were the 128 essential sounds that electronic musicians in the business and the home user just really needed, the general set of sounds. And these are just presets. So it's different from your synthesizer that's programmable. These are all just your presets. And as you can see, it strives to be orchestral. And there's some other kind of stranger things in here as well. So once you're done exploring Volt Mini, dig through all of these sounds as well, okay? There's a lot in here. For example, there's a pan flute. Pretty exciting stuff. There's a whistle, a shakuhachi, a square wave, that's an electronic music instrument. But there's also woodwinds, trumpets, trombones, orchestral hit. If you love 90s boy bands and pop music. All right, you're going to hear that a lot. And then we get some sound effects here at the end. All right, and what's very interesting though, and I think is what's particularly useful, are we get some drum sets. So take a look at these drum sets here. For example, here's a TR-808 set. Now, if you notice, the Drumpler has, let's see, I think it has 12 pads on it, right? Let's open up a Drumpler here real quick. Yeah, look at that. We have okay, we get 12 sounds on the Drumpler. And if we open up a virtual keyboard here, you'll see that okay, there's a lot more than 12 sounds mapped onto this drum kit. So there really is a lot that you can do. So a lot of General MIDI sounds a little dated, but also there's some real gems in here because it's a very extensive set of sounds. And yet it's also a little dated sounding. Okay. Now, you probably noticed that I just keep adding devices down here. Oh my gosh, what is up with my device chain? Well, you know, I'm going to mute that. And let's go back over to this pattern. Where is my pattern? Okay, there it is. There it is. I don't need this Drumpler in here. I'm right here with my, I have the TR-808 set. The 808, that is a reference to the classic Roger Lynn drum machine. Okay, that's right out of the Roland with the drum pads that we use in class. That comes right out of the Roland 808. That's some real history there. Okay, let's listen to this pattern. Okay, just a very basic, that's just Professor Creer's go-to kind of, very safe, just a kick and the backbeat, right? The kick on one, have the backbeat, and then I offset the kick with the upbeat on three. You can hear that on especially the classic Motown records that producers and everybody likes to pull from. Kind of a thin sound, there's all kinds of sounds in this general MIDI module, but remember what I was talking about? I was talking about expanding drum sounds actually with the Volt Mini. So let's add another device now right here to this chain, okay? And I'm going to layer the Volt Mini to the general MIDI player. You can also do this with your Drumpler, okay? I'm just kind of I'm killing two birds with one stone here, but you can definitely thicken this sound of a Drumpler as well with the Volt Mini. I'm just taking the opportunity to introduce two concepts here together. Now, I'm just going to hit the menu down here. It's just a little bit easier. Let's take let's see. Oh, let's try the dirty kick. Actually, let's try a clean kick here. Let's see where that gets us. Okay. Okay, I'll mute it. If I want a little bit more, and bring up the mix or the level here. That's really, all you need to know on the settings of this synthesizer. Okay, now we're layering. Let's see what happens when we add the dirty kick. Or change it to dirty kick. Okay, now maybe we'll bring the level down. Okay, I think that's a little too much crunch, and we can also hear something else. Now we can hear the two, it's kind of squeaking out two different tones, right? And I think this is kind of interesting, actually. This brings up an interesting, I find this little shift interesting. I wanted to show it to you guys. See, there's a little shift there. If we change to, let's say we change to brass. Now it's making kind of a weird little bass line, right? So let's try something else here. If we want those to be independent, again, I go Control click, or I think I can also right click onto the track, and this is on an Apple, and I clone track with regions. Okay, that gives me the exact same thing. So here's my original. Here's my original pattern. And this will be extracted for layer. Extracted for layer. Let's see where this gets us. Going to turn off the Volt Mini on this one now. Let's just hear it right here. Now I only want the brass sound on the kick, right? So now I'm both layering and multi-tracking. So I hope this gives you some ideas of how multi-tracking and layering is very useful for getting one voice, making one voice something that sounds rich. Here we go. Let's hear this. Yeah, I might even be able to turn the general MIDI player off on this track and then give a little bit more, this is thickening up this sound here. Might not even need, brass is kind of an example. Let's see. Now I can. So because a synthesizer sustains more, you have a lot of options now for layering your kick with something else. What I was trying to tell you guys is that even though these model things like drums, brass, and things like that, they're really not those instruments. So don't feel like you're limited. You can make a bass drum with many layers that sustains and maybe has a little bit of pitch. You can make a bass drum or a bass line, that lines up perfectly with your kick. A bass guitar and a kick drum, they work in conjunction anyway, but this way you can really extend those ideas into something very cool. So let's find something like bass right here. Okay, here we go. Let's bring whoops. Probably won't let that ring more. See, we're already getting some fat bass. And what we can do, we could just I think we could just take this here and bring it down. Let's see what this does for us. And I can just uh-oh, what did I just do? I want to highlight all of the tracks. I just want to highlight this. Command C, okay, I just copied. And I'll just put that, see, I'm going to mute this. I'm just going to go back to here and paste that back in. Oh, I don't know where it went. I'm making a mess of my tracks now, but you know what I can do. I'll just highlight this, and I'll do that trick where I control click. Oops. Oh dear. Control Z on that one. That was an alt click. I'm going to control click now. There we go. I got a new keyboard, so the buttons are different. There we go. So I just make a copy here, layer it in octaves. So that is a nice kind of way to get into using a synthesizer in conjunction with your drums to get some direction, to move beyond just playing around with the presets. Of course, you're going to play around with the presets, but then when you're ready to move past the button mashing, there's a nice way to start layering your kick drum, fattening it up with bass, and if you do want to add some pitch in there and then build into a bass line, that's a great starting point. That's my guideline into getting into making some progress. You really can't get into a DAW without dealing with hip hop production, and that's fine with me. I mean, look at this thing's perfect for it. It totally comes up. Now, going back to, let's see, where was I with? Okay, look at this. Again, considering what I was showing you about layering. Okay, here's a general MIDI. Nope, do not remove. Okay, here's a general MIDI device. I set up the bottle blow sound. Okay, here we go. Ooh, kind of fun. But, on its own, I mean, these days, you can't just take one preset and do a line with it and say, there you go, that's awesome, that's totally my music. That's just not the whole picture, right? That's fine, but we can do better than that, because look at this. You can add multiple instances of a GM player and a Volt Mini, and we actually play them together. So let's turn that off. And what I did, here's some ideas. You can use these in all kinds of ways. So a good idea for a patch, okay, these are called patches when you stick them all together. Think about a patch as like a 1950s technology phone bank where the operator is actually using cables. That's called a patch bay, where they use the cables to stick them all together. Okay, here's a pluck sound now. Oh. Again, this... Oh, my little tiny keyboards. Okay, again, it's okay, but that's a it's not a great sound on its own. But if I layer it, okay, now I'm... Okay, and I did mess with the levels a little bit here. Okay, and I got it. For me, that's sounding right in my studio monitors I'm working with. Okay, so I... to give it just a little bit of an attack, and to me that sounds... it gives it just a little bit of crispness. So it turns out that these sounds, these presets, are actually meant to be layered together. And of course, we want to thicken that up a little bit with a bass sound. So let me turn... well, I'll just play this one on its own. show you guys what I'm going for. Again, that sound may come off as a little bland, right? Oh, I mean, it's pleasant, maybe like a church organ or something. But when we layer all of these together now, I think that it gets some pretty nice results, okay? And combining this with all of the wonderful work you've already been doing on your drum projects, considering the way that you guys have been using spatialization and 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 rhythms. When you add this idea of layering your synth sounds and already approaching what you already know with these layers, then you're really going to get the full usage out of these sounds, and out of Amp Studio. Even this free version can sound very fantastic now that you have some insight into how to put these sounds together. Okay, well, I hope that this was helpful. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and I'll see you online.